Welcome all. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Christian Brock with Elected Officials to Protect America. We're a network of current and former elected officials who are committed to solving the climate crisis and ensuring environmental justice and protecting our lands and waters. I am honored to have joining us today a diverse panel of experts and elected officials from across the country, representing, I think, a pretty wide range, again, of Americans from across the state. I'm honored to have with us Dr. Clair Brown, renowned economist and professor of economics from UC Berkeley. From North Carolina, who will be joining us a little bit later. State Senator Natalie Murdock. From Oregon, just joining us now, State Representative and Air Force veteran Paul Evans. From Nevada, if I said that correct, did I? State Assembly Member Howard Watts. From Ventura County, California, I have Supervisor Carmen Ramirez. From Phoenix, Arizona, Councilmember Yassamin Ansari. And from Pennsylvania, Carlisle Borough, Pennsylvania, I have Councilmember Joel Hicks. And rounding us out, but not least, from New York, from Albany County, New York, I have Albany Legislator William Reinhardt. Again, welcome panelists. Great to have you here with us today. And it's exciting to have an opportunity to talk to you about Build Back Better and the climate crisis that we're facing. As we neared the end of 2021, drew to a close, the president's domestic climate agenda was dealt a blow in that the Build Back Better legislation stalled despite over 50 Democratic senators saying that they supported it, supported the majority of the legislation. In November, the House passed its version of the bill with an estimated $2.2 trillion package that included support for education, healthcare, climate programs. However, the bill stalled over in the Senate, predominantly, at least what's been generally publicized, over the price tags and some other concerns. Today, as our panelists speak from their respective perspectives, I'd like for each of them to kind of start off by giving the pros and cons that they see of the Build Back Better bill, specifically the impact from the panelists' perspectives and from the work that you're trying to do. Like I said, we got a diverse group of folks with us today. And I think we see kind of the mini microcosm of the people that will benefit or that'll be impacted by the Build Back Better plan. So a couple of questions to kind of frame this as we start off is, what's your perspective on the plan, the bill or the plan? What actions are you engaging in to address the impacts of the policies and practices that have contributed to the climate crisis within your respective district or jurisdiction? And how does the passage of the president's bill affect your constituents? To start us off, I'd like to introduce Dr. Clair Brown, again, economist and professor at UC Berkeley.
It's great to be here. So I really like what EOPA is doing, and especially the lawmakers from across the country. It's really good to join you because, as you know, the UN Secretary General called out Code Red for humanity as the UN IPCC reported that nations must reduce their carbon emissions by 50% by 2030 in order to have a chance to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Climate change is happening now around the world, and people in all countries are suffering. The last 7 years were the year's hottest on record. People are dying from heat waves, drought, extreme storms, and flooding. The US during last year experienced 20 weather events exceeding $20 billion in direct costs, with another $145 billion in economic damages. The losses from extreme weather will only grow higher and higher. To those who say, we can't afford the cost of investing in a clean energy economy, I join the economists who respond, and all economists will say this: we cannot afford business as usual. The Build Back Better Act provides a historic $555 billion package of tax credits, grants, and other policies aimed at reducing emissions and boosting clean energy. This year, carbon emissions are rising, not falling in the US and around the world. The Build Back Better Act is an excellent investment to meet the US goal of reducing emissions 50% under 205 levels by 2030, as science demands. The climate action is much more affordable than climate inaction. Here's the business case. New research shows that Build Back Better's clean energy tax credit would generate very high returns on investment, up to 400%, empowering the US energy sector to lead the clean energy revolution to low carbon manufacturing and zero emission transportation. Leading companies are jointly urging decisive congressional action on the Build Back Better Act to make the United States more competitive in a low carbon global economy. Every day we delay, the cost of inaction increases. Let me repeat, clean energy investments are generating very high returns. Here's the economics case. By 2030, climate change will be costing the US economy around 1.2% of GDP per year. That's $240 billion annually. Costs jump to 1.8% of GDP by 2050. And these costs don't even include health costs. The cost to our health from fossil fuel generated air pollution and climate change surpasses $820 billion in health costs each year. So the cost of inaction from climate is extremely high. It's $820 billion in health costs, another $165 billion in weather costs and economic damages, and a loss of $240 billion in GDP. That's $1.2 trillion with inaction. So the cost of action is much lower, and plus it creates a world for future generations. The Build Back Better will not add to inflation or the deficit. Instead, inaction will cause reductions in economic growth, lower productivity, lower corporate earnings, and higher inflation. The Build Back Better will support economic growth that provides middle class with good, high-paying jobs and creates a more just and sustainable economy. That's why it's called Build Back Better. Right now, the US is subsidizing fossil fuels with grants and tax breaks. The public is helping pay for extraction and refining of petrochemical and coal products with bad air, extreme weather, and health problems, along with their own tax money to fossil fuels. This must stop. Today, elected officials are here to promote the political solution. President Biden must declare a climate emergency and set up a plan to phase out fossil fuels. Congress must pass the Build Back Better Act to build a low carbon and equitable economy with good union jobs. To sum up, Build Back Better Act is the most significant investment in climate and environmental justice in history. It will meet the climate test by putting our nation on a clear path to cut pollution in half by 2030, create millions of good paying jobs, and invest in environmental justice. And also it will reduce energy bills by $500 a year for working families across the country. I urge you to join together to demand the Senate pass the Build Back Better Act. We want our legacy to be a habitable planet for our children and our grandchildren. The Build Back Better Act is a truly wise Valentine gift of love. Thank you for caring for each other and the planet.
Thank you for that, Dr. Brown. It's interesting to see, or actually to have a better perspective, insight from an economist on what the impact of the Build Back Better plan would be. With that, I'd like to transition to Phoenix, Arizona, and to Councilmember Ansari, and get a perspective of, hey, how is this federal plan shaping up, or looks like the impact for you at the city level, at the local level?
Thank you, Christian. I appreciate it. And good morning, everyone. My name is Yassamin Ansari, and I represent Phoenix, Arizona 7th Council District. My district includes our downtown core, and it also expands through Southwest Phoenix, which includes many historically disinvested Black and Latino neighborhoods. We are the 5th largest, fastest growing city in the United States, but we are also one of the fastest warming cities. My district is home to farming communities as well as the largest concentration of unsheltered residents. So extreme heat and the impacts of climate change are absolutely detrimental to our sustainable future. While Phoenix as a whole, certainly at the epicenter of the climate crisis, I would say my district is very much on the front lines. We know, and we heard from residents, often low-income residents have the highest electricity bills due to poorly weatherized housing. And at times they have to make life or death decisions, whether to run air conditioning on a 115-degree day or to put food on the table. In 2021, Maricopa County also recorded 129 heat-related deaths, which is a 400% increase since 2014. And while we are doing as much as we can to address this disaster, federal help is sorely, sorely needed in Phoenix. We know that more than 200,000 people living in Arizona are critically vulnerable to extreme heat, and we have to stop this unchecked threat, which will produce 80 dangerous heat days a year by 2050. So at the City of Phoenix, at least since I've been on council, we have set some ambitious targets. We recently passed our climate action plan last summer, and I'm also chairing the city's electric vehicle ad hoc committee, where we're working on a roadmap to make EVs more affordable and accessible to working families. But what I can say from the local perspective is that we absolutely need federal support from the climate provisions in the Build Back Better Act to be able to actually accelerate our transition from dirty fossil fuels that are the root cause of extreme heat. We know that financing is always an issue at the city, and so these provisions will make a huge difference in our ability to actually implement the plans that we put in place. And the employment opportunities are really what I see as one of the strongest points of the Build Back Better Act. The employment opportunities in clean energy, renewable manufacturing, infrastructure revitalization, and a civilian climate corps would grow good paying union jobs and provide Phoenix with a substantial economic boost while also saving lives. So I am very excited about this, very supportive, and strongly believe that it's time that we build back better. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Councilmember. Kind of continuing on, and I'm happy to have him joining us today, Assembly Member Howard Watts from Nevada. Sir.
Great, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here and glad to be wearing a red tie, both to show some love for the planet this Valentine's Day, but also to recognize, as was said earlier, that we're in a code red moment for our climate. Like my colleague in Arizona, we deal quite a bit with heat, but one of the things that I want to particularly talk about in Nevada is drought. Just before this conference started, I got a notification to my phone from new research that shows the American West is potentially in the worst drought that it's had in 1,200 years, based on studying tree rings. Here in Las Vegas, along with 6 other Western states and the country of Mexico, we rely on the Colorado River, which has been declining and in a state of drought for over 2 decades. Lake Mead, right outside of Las Vegas, is at the lowest level it's ever been since it was filled. It has triggered the first ever federal shortage declaration, reducing water allocations to Nevada, California, Nevada and Arizona. So, for us, this is a critical moment. We cannot afford to delay. We are seeing the economic impacts of this. We're seeing the health impacts in northern Nevada. Almost all last summer, people couldn't go outside because wildfires had caused the worst air quality ever recorded in those areas. So, now more than ever, we need to take action on climate change. And while we've done a lot, I've worked in the state legislature to pass some groundbreaking legislation to remove useless grass here in southern Nevada to make sure that we can preserve our water supply. And we're working on advancing electric vehicles and clean energy. But again, we need the federal investment that comes with the climate provisions of Build Back Better to really get us to where we need to be in the short time that we have to meet our ambitious climate goals. Our state, we cannot borrow in the way that the federal government can. So we really need that additional federal partnership in order to accelerate some of these programs and meet our goals. And Nevada is ready to lead. We have the highest solar job force per capita in the nation. We have ample solar and geothermal energy opportunities. We have a battery manufacturing plant. So our state is really well positioned to create more of these high quality jobs in the clean energy sector and diversify our economy, one that was particularly hard hit by the pandemic and its impact on our tourism and hospitality industries. So not only is it critical for our future, our health and our well-being that we take action, but our state stands to gain tremendously from the clean energy tax credits, from the clean transportation investments, and the investments in energy efficiency, electrification, and manufacturing that would come from the climate provisions of Build Back Better. So that's why I'm proud to be here and join with my fellow elected officials in calling on Congress to finish the job and pass the climate provisions of Build Back Better so that we can seize this once in a generation or once in a lifetime opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly Member. In transitioning to someone who I know has been working diligently, both starting at the city level, excuse me, and now has moved up to a county seat, but working diligently to fight climate change in California. Supervisor Ramirez. Carmen. Please.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great opportunity to see what people are doing across the country. And it's great to know we're not alone. Everybody can do their part, even in your homes and your businesses, and certainly elected officials. I feel a tremendous responsibility because we are responsible for the future of our people and our planet. And that's really what guides me. I have a whole wall back here of my nieces and nephews and other young people. So I try to think of them every time I make a decision. Is this good for them? Our county, Ventura County, is a beautiful county. We're coastal, but we are among the fastest warming areas in the United States. We are agricultural community, and global warming, climate change impacts our ability to grow the food that people depend on, to provide the jobs that people depend on. And we have, as Assemblymember Watts stated, I received that notice too, that this is the worst mega drought in 1,200 years. I'm on a water agency here for the county, trying to figure out who's going to get the water, how much, and what is really available. Groundwater, state water, we call it state water, comes from the California aqueduct. It depends on the snow melt, which has been Southern California's reservoir, and snow's fading. We know that in the Olympics, the folks are having trouble with that artificial snow. But for me, what really motivates me is what's going to happen to our children, our young people who are suffering from climate anxiety. So it's up to us. You're not all in my age category, but I've been around for a while and we've been working on this. We're seeing some results. We really do need to see the impact on the health of people. Getting to clean energy, getting to zero emission vehicles, homes, businesses. This is life-saving. And we already, sometimes we don't connect the dots. What are the health consequences of pollution, of particulate matter, of wildfires? What is it doing to our health, the health of our people, and of course, all of the living creatures? So we've been working here on more battery storage. I'm very proud that my low-income community of Oxnard really fought a gas-fired power plant. on the coast that they said we had to have it. We couldn't do without it. The lights would go out. No, we got a 100 megawatt battery storage facility that provides jobs, clean energy, and doesn't continue to pollute our air. We need more of that. We need the federal investment to make it happen. And as Dr. Brown said, what is the cost of doing nothing in our health, in the consequences for the future? So really love the idea of getting the workforce involved in training to do the new jobs. There's a lot of fear among our folks who work in the current industries and the fossil fuel industry. What's going to happen? Are they going to be able to pay their bills, send their kids to college? We've got to transition and provide the investment to make it possible for them. I'm also very proud that our county, Ventura County, along with Los Angeles County, created a joint powers agreement that which generates electricity exclusively in renewable energy, and our customers are able to receive 100% renewable, but we need more investment in getting the grid up to speed so we can have all those electric vehicles. I'm so concerned that people feel that they can't afford them. We have to make it possible. We have to have the charging stations, the infrastructure, and the jobs to make it happen. Around here, we have a saying, because we're my district, Oxnard, Greater Oxnard, is Spanish speaking, really have a saying that we received from the farm workers, Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez, and it's "Si se puede," also known as "Yes, we can do this. We're smart enough, we can do it. We just need the investment from the federal government." Please, everyone, support the Senate voting for Build Back Better. We desperately need it, and we'll be happy we do have it.
All right, thank you, Supervisor Ramirez. Moving on to State Representative Paul Evans. Paul, I know you and I have talked before about some of the work and how the transition from legislation down to state and local level of impacts. Could you please just give us your perspective on Build Back Better plan and some of the work that you're doing within the state of Oregon?
How about if I unmute first? There we go. In trying to respond to this, there's three areas I'd like to briefly touch on. The first is your original question of what went wrong and what is wrong with the BBA, what happened. The second is what Oregon is doing. And third, why we need a BBA, or at least the climate portions of the BBA. To begin with, I think my grandpa, who was a dairy farmer, he was a very smart man who explained things in terms that even Congress people might understand. And I think what happened is that some folks in Congress were interested but not committed. And my grandpa used to say the difference between interest and commitment is looking at a ham omelet. The chicken's interested, but the ham is committed. And the problem is we don't have enough people in DC that really believe this should be not a usual partisan game. This is about the future of our species. It is about the future of our planet. It is time for some folks to put their local concerns on the shelf and put America and our planet ahead of those. That's what I think happened with BBA. It was too big. Now it's not going to be too big. Now we can chunk it off and do it in manageable pieces, and we are morally obligated to do so. Second thing, what's going on in Oregon today happens to be the 163rd birthday of the great state of Oregon. And we're here in session trying to push some more environmental legislation through. House Bill 4141 would actually transition petroleum diesel out of Oregon and replace it with renewable diesel within the next decade. So we would still have the ability to electrify personal automobiles and those types of vehicles and encourage other electric trucks. But for the mainstay trucking industry, this would actually provide a 60 to 68% reduction immediately upon using renewable diesel instead of petroleum diesel. And it would actually make a profound difference, especially in rural areas of the state where we don't quite have the grid to support the need. We also are pushing Senate Bill 1534, which is a giant carbon sequestration program that aligns with what the federal government was trying to do with the Climate Corps initiative. Here in Oregon, we have the Oregon Conservation Corps, and it is a natural partnership to be able to do that. We also in Oregon have had since 2015 a permanent low carbon fuel standard where we have been pushing and pushing to try to get emissions below what Oregon's requirement would be even under the Paris Accord. And today, a $25 million grant from the Department of Energy was announced for the first in the nation wave energy testing center out of Newport, Oregon. So Oregon is doing what we can while we can, but we desperately need the support, the energy efficient electrification, the clean energy tax credits, the sustainability accelerator, and more importantly, the environmental and climate justice block grants are key to our long-term strategy to transition Oregon into a better future. We know this is possible. We know that it is important. Even the Department of Defense, that liberal bastion of thought, has recognized that climate change is a clear and present danger to the survival of our nation and to our people and place. It is time for all of Congress to get past their partisanship, past their ideology. It is past time for partisan politics. This is about the survival of our nation. It's about the survival of our planet. And if they can't answer that call, then they need to be replaced, whatever their party happens to be. Here in Oregon, we're waiting to play our part. And I'm just grateful for leaders like you all who are doing what you can in your regions and in your cities and in your states. At some point, there will be that pivot point where our national leaders will either get out of the way or start acting like leaders. But we can't let the pressure up, and we can't let this moment pass. So thank you for letting me be part of the panel. And if there's any questions, I'll certainly try to respond. I unfortunately do have to get back to the floor in about 15 minutes.
Thank you, Representative Evans. Great comments. Actually, it transitions to your comments about electrification of vehicles, kind of transition to, I think very well to Councilmember Joel Hicks, who in previous conversations, we had a concern about the medium to heavy duty vehicle impact of, as you said, diesel, fossil fuel or diesel powered vehicles. Councilmember Hicks, join us, please.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. So Pennsylvania, you may or may not know, is the 12th most polluted state, has the 11th highest unemployment rate in the country. These numbers aren't great. I hope they will get better. And I think Build Back Better, or at least the climate provisions of Build Back Better, is an opportunity to address not only the climate crisis, but focus on health impacts and improve our national security, while also, as we've heard, creating more jobs, spurring the economy. From listening to my constituents here in South Central Pennsylvania, and as the chair of Carlisle's Climate Action Committee, I've come to understand the need for good paying jobs that reflect our energy future and not its past. For the sake of our health and infrastructure and national security, the future has to include clean energy. That's both on the electricity and transportation side. And we need the bold investments that will accelerate the transition and create millions of jobs across the country, including in Pennsylvania, where we anticipate 144,000 new jobs over the next 5 years, from carpenters to electricians and engineers, should Build Back Better move through. These investments, I believe, will unlock our nation's technological prowess and innovative capabilities, both in the public and private sectors. I would say maybe unseen since the Apollo program. And I say that because our nation's electricity grid is actually history's greatest engineering feat. But it's time for a major tune-up and to make the smart grid truly smart, resilient, and efficient. And I believe in doing so, we can reap the benefits of massive energy savings and revitalize Pennsylvania's important manufacturing sector, which accounts for 11% of our total output and employs almost 500,000 workers. Our governor, Tom Wolf, has ushered Pennsylvania into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which along with Build Back Better is one of the many policy tools that we need to complement programs like this. And I think Build Back Better would give the revenues from RGGI a real positive impact in Pennsylvania. It's important to stave off the worst impacts of climate change. We know in 2021, more than 40% of Americans, including communities across Pennsylvania, experienced an extreme weather event. From 2010 to 2020, Pennsylvania experienced 27 extreme weather events, and it cost the state over $10 billion in damages. As a former career naval officer, I understand how climate change can pose a significant national security threat. And the entire US intelligence community has confirmed this. If left unchecked, climate change will cause a scarcity of resources that could lead to exacerbated geopolitical tensions and instability. I think we're seeing that just this week. When wildfires surround bases out west, as Supervisor knows in Ventura, or floods inundate installations here on the East Coast, those forces are unable to focus on their mission. And what we're seeing now is increasingly our statewide National Guard capacities being diverted to do what? To address climate disasters and not training for other important missions. So I would say, in conclusion, we need to bold federal investments. We have to have it, and it will put us on a path to reduce carbon pollution by 50% by 2030 while creating jobs, protecting our nation. I firmly believe it's time to meet the moment. Our climate and our economy and national security cannot wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Last but not least, I'd like to turn over to Legislator Reinhardt from Albany. Bill, you and I have, in previous conversations as well, talked at length about some of the things that you've done, both in your elected official capacity and also in your private sector, focused on clean energy and solutions to our climate problem. Please, could you give us an update on where you all are within Albany and some of the things that you see as possible benefits or impacts of the Build Back Better plan?
Okay, well, first thing I want to say is just to give me a little of my background so people understand where I'm coming from and what was just being referred to. I had a professional career at the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. And then I got involved in elected politics late in life. So I bring the energy wonk side to the political side, and I find it fascinating. I don't want to repeat what others have already said, but I do think that I think it was Mr. Evans who brought up the point that really resonated with me, having both seen this issue, the climate issue, for decades, and now trying to deal with it in the political world, is the problem with Build Back Better was not the bill. The problem was the people voting on the bill and their inability to see the future. As others have commented, I'm a grandparent as well. I care about my grandkids and what kind of future they're going to have. But if you only are focused on what the fundraising numbers are going to be, and if you're only focused on what the important lobbyists are telling you, you're not looking at the future and what it needs. And that's the problem with Build Back Better. So it wasn't the bill, it was the people voting on it on both sides of the aisle, unfortunately. What I do want to say is Build Back Better actually helps all of our communities. If when you listen to all the comments made already, we've got urban areas that benefit, we've got suburban areas like mine that benefit, we have rural areas that benefit. So this really is a wonderful example of forward-looking legislation that links all of our communities together to solve the same problem. It's a global problem. It also is looking at both the energy challenges as well as the connections to the environment, to the economy, to all of our sectors of our economy. That to me was what was so impressive about Build Back Better in its thinking, in its vision. What I do want to say is that as far as my own community, I am seeing my area in Albany County benefit both from the job side, because we have a big wind farm development that's happening at the Port of Albany to help manufacture the giant wind turbines that are going to be going out into the Atlantic. We also in New York State may benefit from a similar activity further out west in the Rochester and Buffalo areas around Great Lakes wind development. My community is also going to become the new home of a very expanding fuel cell forklift enterprise called Plug Power. They're moving into a technology park that's in the jurisdiction I represent. We're looking at 1,600 jobs right there. So these are all, these are little snapshots of what the green economy is going to be if we make it happen. But it's like everything else. It's a combination of political and economic forces that have to align. So that's the big challenge. The community benefits that I see beyond the economic that I just alluded to are the environmental justice issues, which Build Back Better addresses, and I will comment on what New York is doing and what I'm involved in locally in a minute. But also, I think what's really important, and it's been discussed a little bit, but because I have a utility background, I want to talk a little more about the green grid and how that is so important. So on the environmental justice issues here in New York, we have the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that was passed in 2019. And that required that up to 40% of all the money spent on dealing with climate issues had to be invested in environmental justice communities. Now, since that time, there's been a big discussion about, well, how do you quantify that 40% and where's it going to come from? And there are arguments about how much do we raise taxes to generate some of that revenue? How much do we use existing programs? One of the things I'm involved in is taking existing money from the organization I used to work for, NYSERDA, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. And we are funding, NYSERDA is funding clean energy hubs around the state. And I've been very much involved in the one for Albany County. And it's basically saying, how do we take all of our existing programs in renewable energy development, energy efficiency, and direct that to underserved communities, disadvantaged communities. And that includes the rural poor as well as the urban poor who fall into those categories of being underserved, being in environmental justice communities. And this is a program that's just getting underway now. So I can't give you results yet. But what I will say is that in the process of putting all of this together, along with many, many other grassroots folks in the county and in the region, it's very clear how Build Back Better, especially with some of the incentives for building decarbonization and electric vehicles, would fundamentally change the effectiveness of all of these efforts. And so it's a great example of where the combination of the federal and state and local, if they can all come together and be aligned for a common goal, we can really accomplish a lot, but it takes all the different levels. Last comment I want to make is talk about inflation for a moment. People, many senators have said, well, Build Back Better will be inflationary. I beg to differ, as at least one of you commented already. Many economists would disagree with the statement that it's inflationary. I just want to cite some specific examples of why it is not inflationary. When you look at what are the causes of inflation, a big one is oil and gas price inflation. Well, guess what? If we decarbonate our buildings, if we convert to electric vehicles powered by solar and wind and energy efficiency, we do just the opposite. Then what we have is renewable energy becomes an energy cost deflator. So that's really, I think, what we need to, highlight here. And then in addition, I want to talk about the grid for a moment. I used to be involved in the grid down in Maryland when I worked for a utility down there. The power grid is the ultimate supply chain. We've been talking lately in the news about supply chain issues coming back out of the pandemic and how supply chain problems are causing inflation and all this. I would argue that the electric utility grid is the ultimate supply chain. If we don't get this right, everything else gets more expensive, less reliable, and we have problems. So the investments Build Back Better in the utility system, both to make it more efficient and to make it more resilient, are critical to our economic future. And with that, I'm going to stop and be available for questions. Thank you.
Well, perfect transition, Bill. Thank you so much for your comments. Thank you all for your comments. We are going to open up for a bit of a Q&A session. We have several questions kind of posted in the Q&A section of Zoom. I'd like to start with a question centered around basically just what Bill, kind of what you said, how is Build Back Better going to affect or be a positive things for what in general everybody targets as the low income or disadvantaged communities. Specifically, and it's open to anyone, what do you expect or would you like to see in terms of that investment? And here's I'll give you my perspective. Concern is that this doesn't become a community center versus guaranteed grants to low income or to small businesses within the community that can help. True access to electric vehicles within a tax break that is affordable or that falls within a low income bracket, not middle to high income environment or person range. But again, just what is it that you'd like to see within your perspective jurisdictions or issues or concerns that actually delivers an impact to those target groups of the low end and overburdened populations. So and is open to any and to all of you. So looks like Councilmember Ansari may have something.
Sure, thank you, Christian. Well, I think Build Back Better is extremely strong when it comes to addressing environmental racism and injustices that have taken place for decades. The Biden administration actually, as I'm sure you know, has a whole of government approach called the Justice 40 Initiative, which is essentially a framework that says 40% of investments will go to these historically disinvested in communities. And that is across the entire administration. So they are saying overall benefits of federal climate and clean energy investments, 40% will guaranteed go towards these communities. And that's specifically part of the Build Back Better Act. We also know that according to the EPA, the transportation sector is the largest source of carbon pollution in the US, as well as the prime contributor to air pollution, which poses major risk to public health and premature deaths. And this is, again, especially in communities of color and low-income communities. In my district, we have pretty good research from the American Lung Association, which shows asthma rates in children are going up, lung cancer rates are going up. And this is, again, a direct result of air pollution in these communities. So I think the fact that the framework is there and the fact that the act specifically talks about making sure these good paying, high quality jobs are within these communities, and we actually invest in folks, we can start to correct the injustices of the past and hopefully, support those communities that are hardest hit by our environmental racism. I also saw a question in the chat that's sort of related where someone asked about how they can express this to legislators. And I would just say, look into data or research similar to the American Lung Association does great work. So that's always the example that I go to, but I know there's significant amount of research that's been done that actually shows the differences, based on your zip code or where you live and how much money you make, how much you're affected by climate impact. So I think the data is very strong. And also getting those communities and those groups involved in co-creating solutions is also something that we try to do in Phoenix, is work with, organizations in South Phoenix that are doing good work on combating environmental racism and bringing them as part of the process and everything that we do.
Dr. Brown, I believe, had her hand up first, and then we'll go to Supervisor Ramirez.
Oh, sorry. I live in a county that has 7 refineries, And so one of the things that we realize is that federal funding is really important. And throughout California, I live refineries, Carmen lives near where they're extracting. And so California understands that we need to figure out how to create the high road jobs for the workers to transition to, but also we need to support our communities. And that's on the production side. On the transportation side, as you mentioned, we need to ensure that everybody has access to clean public transit or clean EVs so that they can have the mobility that they need. But in California, we also want to make sure that we reduce the vehicle miles traveled, because otherwise we definitely need to get out of people driving everywhere, so that we know that our low income communities that live near refineries, that live near extraction, they're suffering terribly. And so we don't have any trouble in my county. The people who live near refineries, they know that the air is not clean. They know their children are suffering from asthma, but they want to know the transition map of going from refinery jobs to really good, high-paying union jobs where they can be trained and use their skills. And also the cities want to know that they can replace the revenues that they get from big oil. So it's a package that we need to bring together, and that's where the federal government is absolutely critical for California. Thank you. Carmen.
Defer to Senator Murdock, who's just joined us. I already had my chance to speak. I just want to see more investment in clean energy and the making the grid more resilient, as a number of people mentioned.
Thank you for that. And yes, welcome, Senator Murdock. Thank you for being able to join us. I know you're having a pretty busy day. So Bill, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to give Senator Murdock an opportunity to give some comments, and then we'll circle back to that question.
Right, thank you so much, Christian, and apologies if you do hear a little bit of background noise, as Christian knows. Unfortunately, like a lot of electives just got booked with a lot of events today. But first, again, just want to thank elected officials to Protect America for hosting this event and for continuing to shed light on climate change issues. Climate change touches every aspect of our lives. The climate crisis impacts hikers, fishermen, farmers and supply chains, truckers and the transportation of goods, business owners and consumers, sailors and surfers, literally everyone. Without addressing the crisis, our businesses will continue to suffer, the health of our children and seniors will weaken, the cost of living will go up, and our ability to prosper as a society will go down if we do nothing. Last year, 40% of American counties felt the effect of the crisis. We saw wildfires destroying our land, businesses, and homes, hurricanes sweeping through and leaving catastrophic damage, health-related deaths spiking from record-breaking heat waves. North Carolina, my home state, and the state that I serve as a senator, is not immune to the effects of climate change. Nearly 129,000 North Carolinians are at risk of coastal flooding, leaving our coastal infrastructure and low-lying cities vulnerable. The risks contribute to the rising cost of homeowner insurance and declining fish stock. In my district, heavy rainfall and increased flooding harm livestock and destroy our crops, including corn, a significant contributor to our state economy that benefits from rich soil found in the coastal plains. More intense droughts have led to lower crop yields and higher crop failures. By 2050, North Carolina expects to have 50 more dangerous days of hotter weather, decreasing livestock, increasing heat stroke risk for farmers, and elevated wildfire risk for 50% of our state's population. I'm organizing with legislators and climate-focused organizations to lift policies that tackle the #1 threat to our country. North Carolina has taken targeted and data-driven action in solving climate change. The North Carolina Institute for Climate Studies collaborated with the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality and Climate Change Interagency Council to develop the North Carolina Climate Science Report that guides lawmakers to create policies to curb climate change. North Carolina's Clean Energy Youth Apprenticeship Program lays the groundwork for a revolutionary shift towards clean energy. We are moving forward. Most recently, our governor has announced the development of a full-on clean energy plan, and we all know all of the opportunities that will be available to us through Build Back Better. Once we finally get around to getting that passed, as well as the infrastructure bill that has already been passed. So I look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle on these issues. And we have found that we can do just that. Recently in North Carolina, we were able to pass a budget that does a lot of work on resiliency, on flooding, on those issues. And most recently, we've received more guidance on what to do around electric vehicles. We will be building up our EV infrastructure as well. So I'm very excited of what is on the horizon, and I'm doing this work. I'm working across the aisle because we only have one planet. We have to protect it, and looking forward to working with more legislators to achieve those goals nationally, but it also starts at the local and state level. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murdock. So I'd like to, for your comments and for joining us, I'd like to circle back around to the question of the investment, or the call for investment in 40% of the overall benefits of the Build Back Better plan into disadvantaged communities that have been historically marginalized and underserved or overburdened by pollution. And Bill, you had some comments.
Yeah, what I wanted to do is to get back to where I said in my remarks earlier, how I've been involved with the Clean Energy Hub program that's being developed in New York State to serve these environmental justice and underserved communities. The focus is on customer-related programs. So it's things that I've been involved with through my involvement as on the volunteer side with Solarize Albany County. We've been doing this. I've been doing this for several years. I think many of you may be familiar with what Solarize campaigns are. They started in Portland, Oregon, but we started doing it in upstate New York around 2014. In any event, but the point I want to make is the incentives in Build Back Better Act for electric vehicle deployments, both the consumer incentives as well as the infrastructure build out. Similarly, the incentives for renewable energy build outs. Those are fundamentally going to empower these communities to adopt some of the technologies which, even though they are economical, they are difficult for these communities to access because of the basically the capital requirements. So just as an example, I have solar panels on my barn. I put them in years ago. But people in EJ communities, typically, if they have a roof that's good for solar, for them, it's hard to either pay for the capital up front or get the loan. So, and likewise with electric vehicles, you have a similar situation where the capital requirements up front are the barrier, even when the technology is economical. If you look at it from a life cycle cost perspective over the life of the product, it makes sense, but it's hard to get that capital up front. So the Build Back Better incentives help with that. And what I've seen in the Clean Energy Hub work that we've already been involved with here in the Capital District of New York State is there is something that I have under one of the programs I'm involved with on the volunteer side now, community solar. There's no capital requirement up front, and that seems to be doing very well, for example, in the city of Albany, because there's no capital barrier. But for things like the electric vehicle or the rooftop panels, there is a capital barrier. And that's what I think Build Back Better can fundamentally help with. And that's really where I think we need to look, because one of the things I found in that grassroots organizing for this was,
Bill?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. We're kind of hitting a hard stop here, and I'd like to give Assemblymember Watts a final comment before he has to depart, and maybe touch on one of the other questions that he can address.
Certainly, thank you. I would just echo the comments from the fellow presenters, and I just want to emphasize how much of a game changer and paradigm shift the Justice 40 and the explicit investments in historically underserved communities is. This is something that we've been working on in the state of Nevada in terms of building these investments and these commitments explicitly into policy, because we have seen historically in the past that if we do not target our programs to these communities, very little often makes it to them, and they're often the last to receive those benefits, leaving us to play catch up. So I'm just extremely excited that we are making this commitment of a minimum of 40% of these benefits reaching the communities that are most in need. So, that's kind of what I had to say about that. I think, in terms of the biggest climate issue, I know that was another question. I think I made it clear for us in Nevada, it's drought. We are the driest state in the nation in terms of the amount of precipitation we get on average each year. And that is continuing to go down. So that's something that we're committed to working on. And I just want to thank all my fellow panelists and EOPA for putting on this event today and giving me the chance to speak.
Nope. Thank you, sir, for joining us. And I know you need to jump, but you bring up a great point, and something I'd like to transition with the rest of is, at least for those of us in the West, we are rapidly approaching the next, spring, summer, and our next, unfortunately for California, our next fire season. Even though we've had some significant winter storms in the East and throughout the middle of the country, water is kind of that universal resource. As Bill, you mentioned that, hey, the electric grid is the great supply chain. Water is a universal resource. And it ties into not only our communities, but our agricultural and farming aspects. How do you guys see, especially, or what are some of the infrastructural investments that you all are facing within terms of the no-see-ums, I'll call them, the things that people just kind of take for granted, in particular, being able to turn on the tap and get fresh water?
We really haven't talked too much about sea level rise. I'm on a working group of members of elected officials from counties and cities up and down the California coast, which is really serious because a lot of our infrastructure is on the coast, sanitation plants, even electrical power plants, et cetera, electrical or gas fired. We have to get them off there because they're going to be underwater. I know in San Francisco, San Francisco airport looks like it's in danger of being underwater. So those are the kinds of things we have to, we're probably not going to be able to stop a lot of that, but we have to work towards minimizing the impact, because a county government, a city government is responsible for public safety, keeping the roads open, rescuing people who are in danger. And I think it does mean we have to think about where should we build. And that is a big issue for California, because we need more housing. We need it in the right place. We don't need it, in my opinion, in wildfire areas. And Christian, now we say there is no wildfire season in California. It's all year long. We just had one this weekend in Laguna Beach, which is more of a coastal community, but it's so dry. We haven't had enough rain. We have to spend a lot of money fighting fires. And this is some places, some homeowners can't get insurance. And this is something we have to think about too. What is the real cost to the individual? And then putting it all together, what's the cost to society for taking care of this? And as Dr. Brown says, pay me now or pay me later, big time.
Well, awesome. I know we have several folks that may need to depart, but anyone else has some comments to that? If not. All right. Well, I'd like to thank our attendees for joining us today. I apologize, we ran a little long, but had some great comments, and I wanted to take advantage of having such great speakers and a wealth of knowledge and experience join us today.